Manx Radio Podcasts, powered by Shaw.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Hello and welcome to the latest look back at Talking Heads. Taxi patient transfer services, the potential sale of the old courthouse in Ramsey, and a drop in the economically active population were all up for discussion this week. Here's Stu Peters with more.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
Should all government contracts always be put out to competitive tender? A Liverpool taxi firm which provided hospital transfers for Manx patients says it's disappointed to have its ties with government cut. Bridgewater Transfers has carried out the specialist taxi journeys for a number of years under an agreement with the Department of Health and Social Care. But after a tender process last year, the company says it's now been informed via email that the contract has been lost. Bridgewater boss Mike Jenkins says it's a major blow for his business. An online petition to Tynwald members has now been launched and garnered almost 1,000 signatures already. So what do you think about this? Is it important that all contracts are put out to tender, always? Should all contracts awarded represent the best value for money for the taxpayer? Or are there times that good value isn't just about the cheapest price? As Henry Royce once said, the quality will remain long after the price is forgotten, which has always struck me as being a particularly good way of looking at things, as long as you can afford to buy a Rolls Royce in the first place. Hi Stu, with regard to Bridgewater taxis, they've proven to be a reliable and excellent service for 20 years and now seem to have lost the job due to penny pinching. These guys provide support to patients at their lowest possible time in their lives due to serious illness. They go far above and beyond their duty as taxi drivers. It's extremely sad to see this happening. Petition signatures now up to almost 1,400 people. I sincerely hope the government rethinks their decision. That's from Phil. Thank you, Phil. Value for money is more important than just the cheapest price, says somebody else. Disgusted once again by the Isle of Man government, they obviously aren't thinking of the sick patients. The Bridgewater drivers are amazing, caring and very patient, worth every penny that they paid, says Di. We've got Maureen on the line. Hello, Maureen. Have you used this service?
I have, and I think it's only the people who have used the service appreciate how, very serious this matter is. Because they're not just a taxi service, they're a patient transfer service.
Yeah.
And they make sure you get safely from A to B.
Yes.
Now, I've got cancer, a very low grade, fortunately, and a rare cancer, and I have to go away twice a year for checkups. I have gone through all the scans and the operation and everything. And when you go to a big hospital like Aintree, which is the one that I go to, there's different entrances. You go to one if you go for your operation, one for scans, and the one I go for checkups. Now, these drivers know, when you go, they say, now, which one are you going to? Show me a paper. Right. When you're on your own, I always travel on my own, because I'm quite capable of doing it, to save expense to the government. They sort of say, this is your entrance. Go in there. Now, there's the restaurant over the road. Now, I'll be back for you at 3:30. Here, I'll park here. You be here. Right. On one occasion, I was having a big scan, and it delayed. It wasn't anybody's fault. It just delayed. Yeah. I was panicking. I thought, I'm going to miss the plane. So I mentioned it to the chap who's doing the radiologist, and he said, you're not going to get down past 3. Don't worry. Give me the form with the Bridgewater on. He got somebody to contact them. They said, don't worry. We'll send something for you afterwards. When my scan was finished, I was picked up, taken to the airport. That sort of thing. They look after you. And the people with wheelchairs, I don't have a wheelchair, but people with wheelchairs, they return the wheelchairs over to the airport building. They make sure they're now stepped down safely. There's just like having professional medics, really.
Well, I've read a lot of the comments about this over the last few days, and people say it's almost like family. I think the owner of the taxi firm came over for a funeral for one of his previous customers and things like that. So it's like a family thing. But, and again, I'm playing devil's advocate. I've got nothing against Bridgewater, but there's nothing to say that whoever takes over the contract wouldn't offer that same service, is there?
Well, not really. You can say that, but it's happened. They've tried it before, trying to cut down costs, and I think absolutely you have to look at every penny. Right. The way we are now, the National Health, you do have to look at every penny. But they've already tried doing this, giving this to another company, and it was disaster.
Right.
Disaster. Okay. So they've already gone down that road once.
Tried it once and it failed.
Tried it once. They surely once enough. They've got fresh eyes on now, and they've sort of thought, this might work, we'll do that. But those fresh eyes, I mean, they're in their pay package. they've probably got private medical care, and they won't have any worries about having to go over and getting a minibus and go to a hospital where they know nobody. They won't have any of that. That'll all be catered for.
Yeah.
So it should be decided by people who have either experienced it or, you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, maybe government will listen to all these different points of view about it. So, all right, Maureen, well, listen, thank you very much. And I'm glad that you're on the mend and that things aren't as serious as they could be.
That's right. And it's a lovely day today, so forward and onwards and forward, yeah?
Excellent. Nil disparandum and all that. It's just political penny pinching for the sake of penny pinching. Typical. Well, like I say, that's what we employ them to do, really. People will sign petitions just to say that they've been part of something. We trusted the government when they gave the contract to Bridgewater, so let's trust them again and ignore the 1,000 minority and do what they're being paid and do what they're paid to do. All right. Hey boy, I know it's tough for them, but why should they keep the contract? If it's up for tender, it's up for tender, says G. What does Buster mean? The government's money? It's the taxpayers' money, says David H. Well, somebody got in touch a week or so ago and said, no, actually, once you've given it to the government, it's the government's money. We're all wrong in saying it's our money. It's not once we've given it to the government. What people forget that Bridgewater were once the new company after A&Y lost the contract and people were the same and didn't want Bridgewater. At the end of the day, give the new company a chance, then relook at the situation, says Pete. Well, that's kind of my feel about it, yeah. It's very easy to say we don't want any change. It's the default position in the Isle of Man, isn't it? But it's not always the best solution, that. Wasn't it a few years ago that the tender process ousted Bridgewater and the firm they took over gave abysmal service, so Bridgewater were begged to come back, says Ken. I don't know, but I think somebody else suggested that. I'm having a Groundhog Day, or have we been in this exact same position the last time this contract came up for tender, says Rich. Isn't it enough that we have to go off island for treatment? Traumatic enough. Leave the taxis alone, they do a brill job. Let's go to the lines and talk to Hans. Hello, Hans.
The thing from Bridgewater is that if we are going out and getting somebody else in for maybe a month, then Bridgewater hasn't got the drivers that he has got now.
Yes.
Because he can't afford it. And the service is second to one. I've used it as well. Yeah. Going over to get checked across.
Well, usually with taxi firms, I don't know if it's still the case, it used to be the case, that all the drivers were pretty much self-employed, so they will probably go where the work is. So, whoever takes over this contract might well end up using the same drivers, you don't know.
No, but I would say, I would not even thinking, I would rather think for the patient that has been using the last bodies for maybe the last 10 years and keep the same bodies because they are the people that they know.
Yes.
You try and be ill and not know where you're going and come in with some new drivers that don't know you.
Okay, fair comment, and that's a comment that I've heard before as well from people. Let's go to line 3, and we've got Malcolm on. Hello, Malcolm.
Hi, Stu. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm just wondering, everybody seems to be so for Bridgewater taxis, which I'm sure they're all right, and I'm sure it works very, very well and has done for a number of years. I just wonder if, rather than go through the tender process, would it be an idea for our boss man here to speak to the boss of Bridgewater Taxis and just negotiate with him, say, look, we're a bit hard up at the moment. Could you come down a bit with your price? And just sort of a bit of a negotiation rather than a big tender process.
Real world, I don't think that that's how it would work, and I think that probably the whole idea of a tender process is to see what the going rate is for the job, and as Buster said, you can't actually put something out to tender and then go to the incumbents and say, somebody's bid a lot lower than you, do you want to match their price to keep the job? Because that wouldn't be fair on company B, would it?
No, maybe not, but what I mean is possibly scrap in this particular instance, scrap the tender process altogether and
right.
just talk to the people and say, because it appears that they are doing such a good job. My wife, 2 or 3 years ago, she was a travelling companion and used to go with some of the patients who couldn't manage to get on the plane, the poor eyesight and so forth. She used to travel with them over there, and she has great praise for Bridgewater Taxis, the way that they treated her and
oh yeah, I mean
patients.
That's the sort of thing that we're hearing a lot. I mean, people are full of praise for the service. But to your original point, I mean, I work for people sometimes, and if they said, said, yeah, you're doing a cracking job and everybody thinks it's fantastic, will you do it for less money? Then I think the second word might be off.
Well, I don't know. I think it's worth a try, but that's only me. Maybe, like you say, maybe it's too simple. Maybe it's the real world. I don't know. But I mean, I'd been in business until a dozen years or so ago, and I sort of worked like this with people supplying us with things, and it very often worked. Just a bit of negotiation, and there we are.
All right, no, it's a perfectly valid point. I suspect it wouldn't work, but not to guarantee that I'm right and you're wrong by any manner of means. I feel sorry for the company taking over, as no doubt people will whine for the slightest thing. Make sure that everybody knows about it. Please give them time to settle in. You may like them. People who are so concerned about the taxi should pay towards the fare themselves to make up the difference. Stu, I remember a similar situation about 20 years ago when the then provider lost the contract, EY Cabs. Luckily, I haven't had to use the service, but the health service has to save money and in this case can't do right for doing wrong. That from Howard. Government will never be able to cut their cloth accordingly if every time they make a tough decision an online petition causes them to bottle the original plan and do a U-turn, says Josh. That's valid too. 3 comments from people that all say effectively, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. David got in touch with that. So did Brian, and a different David got in touch. Now, we've got a response from government, so in lieu of reading all the other comments, which are 99% in favour of Bridgewater, let me read you the actual word from government on this. The Isle of Man government has a significant number of contractual arrangements with external providers of goods, equipment and services in both the private and charitable sectors. Contracts always run for set periods, usually 3 or 5 years. Government policy dictates that the renewal of contracts should be based on competitive tendering exercises, and the departments and other public bodies which are carrying out such exercises will be supported by the procurement services team in the Attorney General's chambers. At the start of a procurement exercise, a detailed pack of information is prepared and given to interested parties detailing exactly what's required from the provider and how the whole exercise will be conducted. The bids received from interested parties are assessed objectively and under the main headings of quality and price. For the Liverpool patient transfer exercise, the evaluation weighting for quality and price was 50-50. Government policy sets a number of rules for procurement, including that the standard evaluation approach to be used requires designated bodies to consider criteria other than just price when evaluating a tender. Quality criteria are not permitted to prevail over cost without the prior approval of Treasury. In relation to the transfer of patients from Liverpool Airport to local hospitals, a competitive tendering exercise has been carried out in anticipation of the end of the current contract. A number of parties were interested in the contract and tendered for it. Those parties were notified about the outcome of the exercise by a letter dated the 2nd of March. No public announcements will be made by the department until a period of 10 working days has ended, i.e. the 16th of March. This so-called standstill period allows the parties who tendered to seek feedback and appeal against the outcome, all of which is confidential. The details of how the procurement process is run and the mandatory requirements for confidentiality until it's concluded are made clear to all interested parties in the detailed pack of information issued when they express interest in tendering for the contract. The Department of Health and Social Care appreciates that patients using the transfer service in Liverpool wish to be assured that it will be managed professionally, caringly and with their best interests in mind. The department was motivated by the same considerations when carrying out the procurement exercise. Patients have strong personal views about the current provider of the service and some have chosen to express those through an online petition. There you go. That's the official word on it.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Ramsey courthouse, should it be sold into private ownership? It was confirmed yesterday that the property is for sale on the open market. We had a couple of comments on the programme about it. Home Affairs Minister Bill Malarkey made the announcement in response to a question in the House Keys from Ramsey MHK Laurie Hooper. It was put on the market for £475,000, went on sale yesterday morning. Should the building be sold by government or should it be kept in public ownership? What would you like to see it used at? I think people are talking about its use. We understand from the Minister, who repeatedly told John, that nothing can happen to the building itself except what it's going to be used for. That could change, couldn't it? It could be a pub, a restaurant, a nightclub even, could be turned into offices for somebody. Would that matter as long as the building itself is left there and the grounds around it are accessible for people? We haven't heard any supportive comments from Dr. Allinson on this matter, says Ken. He should be on side with the people who elected him. Peel has a centenary centre. Ramsey has nothing like this, so this would be a good use for it. On the face of it, I expect you're probably right. The only worry about, I suppose, that is that, you know, we often reflect on the fact that the Isle of Man is a fairly small place. So I'm guessing that there are probably events put on at Peel Centenary Centre that people from Ramsey go to. And so if Ramsey had its own place, then it would affect other places like Peel Centenary Centre, I suppose, adversely. So yes, it might be more convenient, but it could have a bit of a knock-on effect. Hey boy, I think that Mr. Hooper is a tad late with the courthouse. The deal for this was done a long time ago. Oh, here we go. And it's part of the grand regeneration scheme, and all this is just a smokescreen. Watch this space and see that I'm right. Facts from Frank. Okay, all right. I don't think anybody has said this, but what Ramsey really needs in the old courthouse is a McDonald's. No, nobody has said that. It's an interesting thought. Would you like to see Ramsey Courthouse turn into a fast food place? How much money does the public think there is to maintain all the buildings owned by government? The budget for maintenance is decreasing in real terms each year. If the building isn't essential, get it off the maintenance bill, says Alan. Stu, I think they should have it as a snooker and pool hall, says Kylie. Snooker and pool, do people still play those games? What about a community pub? Well, I mean, that area is pretty well served with pubs, isn't it? So I don't know that there is really a need. Maybe I ought to set up a radio station. I know. Let's have Radio Ramsey and base it there. And we'll just say that we're going to broadcast to Ramsey, maybe to young people, and then within a couple of years we can expand that and broadcast to everybody. I think that's the model that works. Stu, the courthouse would make an ideal post office, says Johnny Ramsey. First person to suggest that today, John, thank you. Mr. Malarkey sounds so confident the building would be protected because it's listed. You should come and have a look at the commercial in the old nightclub in Market Square. They too are listed, but in a very bad state. I think they're both owned by the brewery. Let's hope that they haven't registered an interest in purchasing the courthouse too. That from Wendy H. Hey boy, if I had 500,000 to buy the courthouse, I'd make it pay 10 times over. Simple. Buy it and then rent it back to government at an exorbitant rate. Get them to pay the maintenance and upkeep, then you've doubled your money. Kick them out, flog it to McDonald's or Starbucks. Easy, it's been done before, says Frank. Right. Okay. I'll defer to your greater knowledge on how to make money because I'm not very good at it and you clearly are. Let's go to the lines. We've got Buster on. Hi, Buster.
Yeah, very simple. They've had this petition which apparently 1,000 people have signed. So there's no doubt there's strong public support, very strong, to keep it. 475 isn't out of the way. It's not a huge amount. It is a huge amount, but when you go to buildings. But Ramsey commissioners could buy this at the drop of a hat.
Right.
And, I mean, you can do borrowings over 30 or 60 years, or, I mean, you're talking of pence on the rate.
Yes.
And, you're not going to change Bill Malarkey because he is saying he has to get value for money, which we have to accept.
Yeah.
But the people have spoken. It just needs Ramsey commissioners to make decision to buy it.
And do you think that their silence on this effectively speaks volumes? Do you think that maybe they've considered this and thought, well, actually, it'd just be an albatross around our necks that we'd never get any money back for the thing. We'd end up using it for community purposes. It'd end up being run down, needing all sorts of maintenance, and we just can't make a business case for it.
Right. Well, that's the other side of the coin, Stu. And I mean, I know, with the buildings we had, you can find a use for them at night time, but trying to find a use for them in the daytime is a real nightmare. And I mean, when you consider the Memorial Hall had a great office to the side of it, car park, and only 2 miles outside Douglas, we really struggled to get anybody to use it at night time.
Well, that's it, yeah. Or the other way around, that people can find plenty of use for it during the day as offices or whatever, but you've got to pay rent on it 24 hours a day, and you could do with another use. And people think if the building's there, they will come, but it's not a film, is it? It's not a movie plot, this, and actually to sink best part of £500,000 into something like that, I think you need to know that you're going to get a return on it.
Well, I mean, in local government, you can do things that you will always not get a return on, like a playground, etc. You're not going to get a return on them.
Yes.
But on a building, you're not doing the building any favour if it's not getting used.
No.
Because, it will slowly become more moist, damp, etc. I mean, a building needs to be used. It needs to live. It needs to breathe. But it's down to the people of Ramsey. If there's 1,000 have signed a petition, then they've said, go ahead. So it's the commissioners to make that decision.
But these petitions again, Buster, people these days reach for a petition before they reach for the phone usually. And it's easy to get a lot of numbers on these things, especially online petitions. Do they really have much value, do you think? Does anybody take any notice of them?
Well, personally, I never used to. I used to acknowledge, people had signed it. But say I was your next door neighbour and I knocked on the door and said, "Shoo, I'm opposed to that development across the road.
Yeah.
I want to object. Would you sign it?" You're going to think, "Oh, I suppose I should. I don't want to fall out with
Absolutely.
your neighbour."
Yeah.
So you sign it, and then it just carries on. So, what weight you give to a petition? It's a difficult one. But Ramsey have already done that, so. It's the commissioners should come clean and say, we're going to buy it or we're not.
Yes.
And that's it. No messing about, sending, emails from one person to somebody else.
Yeah.
Come out and say, right, guys.
Bit of transparency. Yeah. Either we fancy it or we don't fancy it, and here's why.
Yeah, and if we're not interested, then, you guys can do whatever you want. You can maybe fund it yourself or whatever. But just make the decision.
Yep, all right. Yep, that seems like a good bit of advice. Thank you. I need to move on, Buster, but thank you very much for your call. We've got David Quirk on. Hi, Quirky.
Your last contributor was spot on. What are the commissioners doing up there about it? They must have a plan. He's quite right. They could fund this over a number of years if they were willing to do it.
Yeah.
And we need to find out what it is. And I'm sorry, but Mr. Malachy's right. He's looking after all of us on the island. It's a government asset. You wouldn't give it away if you had it. You're a taxpayer, like the rest of us are the taxpayers at the end of the day.
Yeah.
We don't give the silver away for nothing, do we?
No, absolutely.
And the trouble is, with Ramsey, they need to get their act together. And I don't have many friends at Ramsey. And I won't have
You haven't got many friends.
But I've got a few. What they should have had years ago was the marina.
Right.
I mean, that's the whole bottom there. It needs something to stimulate the economy up north, and the marina would have done it.
But it's like anything on the Isle of Man, David, isn't it? In that, I remember the marina being discussed, and there were people who were absolutely vehemently against it for very valid reasons. At the time about that it wouldn't clear properly, and when you look at the problems that you've got in Peel, you think, well, maybe they had a point.
No. They're two different there. There's,
all right.
You learn by your mistakes. The biggest issue up there was that people didn't accept you had to have commercial activity. You had to have some properties alongside the marina, which happens everywhere else in the world. When you go around to these different places and you look at them, they're active marinas, and the stimulation that happens after that is positive.
Yeah, vibrant. All right, fair dues. Thank you very much, David. Let's go to line 4. We've got Michael on. Hello, Michael.
I live in Ramsey, as you probably know by my phone number there.
Okay.
What I'm looking at is why the hurry to get rid of this building all of a sudden.
Yeah.
It's not long since, it's only been empty since the Holy Brewery took the post office over.
Yes.
And the government is sitting on so many sites. I mean...
But that's not really a reason to leave it. If the decision has been that it's now not going to be used as a post office and there isn't an alternative plan for it, so surely it's the time to say, well, let's do something. We'll either sell it or see if anybody else wants it.
Well, they could do that with Summerland, the prison site, the bus station, the police station, and Lord Street and Port Erin. There's acres of land at Derby that's been sitting on for years.
Yes.
And, of course, the other thing is, what's included in this sale? I mean, the War Memorial is there.
Yes.
What's the position with that?
I presume that's all protected.
Yeah,
I presume, and I can't tell from the sale particulars, I presume it's just the building itself. And the exterior is
going right of access.
Well, yes, but I mean...
There's a load of legal tangles here.
Yeah, it's
lawyer's field day.
I mean, your point about the old prison site and Summerland and all, they're just plots of land, and they're not going to fall down if they're left alone for another 100 years.
Well, the police stations will.
Police station, yeah, okay.
I mean, Ramsey commissioners are doing, and the British Legion here in Ramsey, remembering the fallen of the first 100 years in the First World War.
Yeah.
And that's happening around the War Memorial.
Right.
And it's time for them to say what is happening with the War Memorial.
Yes.
And that should be all in the details of sale, which I haven't seen, I will admit. But that needs to be dealt with.
Yep, all right, fair dues. Thank you very much for your call, Michael. Let's go back to the north and have a quick word with Wilf. Hello, Wilf.
Oh, I'm a commissioner, as you know.
Yeah.
And this here business over the courthouse, well, our main concern, as what we've been told, is that it's not just the building, it's the land right out to the pavement.
Okay.
Right round it. So my concern is, well, of course, we've got the War Memorial, that's ours, but that's planted on somebody else's ground if somebody else buys it.
Yes.
But the thing is, if somebody buys it other than us and says, right, we're going to do this with it, there's going to be a restaurant, whatever, they could come out and say, the only public that's allowed on this area is our public.
Okay.
Our customers.
Yes.
You see what I'm getting at?
Razor wire around the perimeter.
Exactly. Plus the fact, if you have the likes of, well, a pub, nightlife, whatever, it's not a good place to have a war memorial.
Okay.
Anything could happen, whatever.
So why haven't the commissioners bought it? Why haven't the commissioners said, we'll have it?
Yeah, this is all very well, you see. We're having a meeting, I think it's tomorrow night, over this thing. But the thing is, it's all right saying, why haven't they just bought it? I don't know how much that would put on the rates, if anything, or whatever.
Yeah.
We buy it. I would like the public to say, buy it. A lot of the public to say, buy it. Then we know which way we're going.
Yes.
Now, if we buy it, we got to do something with it.
Oh, yeah.
You see, so it's got to see really, it's got to earn money, in a way, to pay for it, but it's got to earn money with the public involved.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, it wants to be a Ramsey community centre type thing, doesn't it? Ideally, I would have thought.
Well, yes, yeah. I mean, that's not going to make any money as such. It's not big enough for the sort of a centenary centre thing. I know in the past I'm told that we had bits of shows and things on there, but I think we had a lot less population then. We can't get that many people in there. It's not as big, anywhere near as big as Peel Centenary Centre.
Is it not? Okay.
No, plus there's internal walls in there which are load-bearing walls. So
you can't
if we were to make it into a big hall, if you like,
Yes.
as big a hall as we can get,
Yeah.
we're talking more money.
I see. All right, well, good things. But there's a meeting, do you say, tomorrow to discuss it?
Well, yes, but it's a private meeting at the Commissioners, you see. It's not a public one.
No, sure. But, I mean, we'll find out what the Commissioner's view is afterwards.
We've got to make some sort of decision.
Yeah. All right, good stuff. Well, hopefully we'll be the first to hear about that, and we'll tell you about it. Thanks for calling, Wilf. I hope the brewery don't buy it. They should be made to use the properties they already own in Ramsey. 2 pubs they've just closed, rotting away, one being a nightclub. Should still be the police station or a post office. Okay. The old post office, turn it into an Aldi or a Lidl. That's what we need, says Bert. Dr. Allinson's silence on the courthouse affair is positively deafening. I'm beginning to regret having voted for him, especially after the water rate rise affair, where he appeared to try to divert attention by praising the MUA staff for their efforts during Storm Doris. As for Mr. Malarkey, sounding very defensive, became quickly angry during the Manx Radio interview. Maybe he's a graduate of the Eddie Tier School of Diplomacy. That from Del Boy. He often does sound angry in interviews, actually. The minister, when questioned, became agitated and aggressive towards the interviewer. His attitude seemed to be one of somebody who had something to hide, says Kevin. Oh, there you go. Body language, you see. How about a cinema for Ramsey? Okay. Do people still use cinemas, with the rise now in digital media and stuff? Don't people prefer to sit at home with the widescreen plasma tellies? Give it a couple of years and the threat of a rate rise, the commissioners will be moaning about the cost of upkeep of this building. They'll be looking for somebody to take it over. It's a nice building that's been many things since it stopped being the courthouse. It's a landmark, but that doesn't mean it'll stop being that when a private company or person takes it over. It should just be sold with architectural conditions, says Jane. Thank you. Bill's wrong. RTC have never asked for it free, and if he'd bothered to offer the courtesy of discussing this with them, he'd know of the work done previously. This is from Jackie. How disappointing. He's willing to understand community in his own constituency, but not for Ramsey. He also doesn't understand how the area will change depending on use. A bar will bring in different feeling to what is being used by families now. Smokey is lurking outside, drunks on the memorial, says Jackie. Right, okay. What's so special about the courthouse? Turn it into a pub. Nobody goes to pubs anymore. Well, you've kind of answered your question there. If nobody goes, why would you want to put money into it? When the team bidding to take over the courthouse from the post office put their business plan together, it included a range of ideas, some free of charge, some revenue earning, for making the courthouse a multifunctional building to better serve the needs of the people of the North over its 2 floors, and at the same time help to cover its running costs. These ideas are as relevant today as they were 18 months ago. That from Toby. Yes, I think Toby mentioned that last time we were talking about the courthouse, so yeah, seems like a good idea to relook at it.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
You're listening to the latest Talking Heads podcast, featuring highlights from the programme over the past week.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
How can the younger generation be persuaded to stay here in the Isle of Man? Growing the Isle of Man's working population set to become a dominant political theme after an alarming drop of almost 2,000 people. The official unveiling of the 2016 census results yesterday told a story already widely anticipated. The hoped-for influx of new residents has not yet materialised. The census, which will be published online today, reveals an exodus of people in their 20s, with emigration in the 20 to 29-year-old group far outstripping inward migration. Elsewhere, the census shows the number of people living to 95 is rapidly growing while the birth rate is falling. And for those who love crunching numbers and plotting trends, there's a plethora of data on employment, housing, birthplace and much more. What do you think of this? Is it inevitable that the younger generation is going to leave the island? What can be done to encourage people in their 20s to stay here in the Isle of Man and contribute to our economy? And one early comment, fairly snarky, from David. He says, your news said 1,200 on your show. It's nearly 2,000. Get your facts right, please. I think the facts were right all along, David. It's just that maybe you didn't understand them. So let me explain. 1,200, a net reduction in the population. Young people, 2,000 down. So I'm guessing that means that 800 people over 29 moved to the island, and that's what gave us the net overall reduction of 1,200, whilst we still lost 2,000 young people. I'm not a mathematician, but I think it's something like that anyway. I think it's that kind of a thing. Catherine just buzzed through to say, yes, I was doing quite well with that explanation about the net reduction in people working in the Isle of Man, until I used the word young. It wasn't just young people, 2,000 young people who've left the island. It's 2,000 economically active people, so 2,000 working people have effectively left. But the overall figure is 1,200, so one presumes that pensioners have moved over or whatever. Let's go to the lines. We've got Neil on. Hello, Neil.
I think the answer is very, very simple. I work with a lot of younger people, and the rally call is always the same. It's the extortionate price of rental property and property in general. Yeah. And coupled with that, they are not allocated the more highly paid top jobs on the island, which tend to go from people off island. Okay. So they're voting with their feet and they're getting out, and you can't really blame them for that, can you?
Do you think, Neil, because I've been thinking about this, do you think that this is one of these things where almost, a system will find its own level on the basis that people have been saying for years that property is too expensive, especially for young people trying to get the first foot on the housing ladder? People just can't afford to do it anymore. Does it mean that people are going to leave to the point where the property market has got to sort of decline to a more reasonable level in most people's eyes, and it's just one of those cyclical things where it all sorts itself out?
Well, I think property is far too high, but I think in tandem with that, there seems to be an economic stimulus from from developers themselves to really apply their resources to buy-to-let properties rather than pitching adequately, reasonably priced properties which would suit younger people starting off.
And what's the answer to that? For government to take more of an active part in say, buy-to-let or the rental market?
They could legislate against that. They could make it very, very difficult for the buy-to-let market by introducing a more fiscal taxation system which would hit them a little harder if they have second or third homes. And there are some people who have a raft of second homes let out. But it's a difficult situation. I don't know whether growing the population is really the answer either, because as you grow the population, you, of course, have to provide more services. Those services then require obviously a greater input of financial stimulus to keep those going, which needs even more people coming in. So do you draw a line in the sand and say, well, this is it, or what? But,
well, I'm guessing that there again that there is some sort of a level to it. So there'll be some sort of a government formula, I expect, that says that for every economically active person that moves to the Isle of Man, that's going to be worth, I don't know, let's just pick a random figure, let's say £1,000 a year in taxation and other benefits to the exchequer, and it's going to cost £800 or something to put the infrastructure in place to support them. So there is a net benefit, I'm guessing, to everybody that comes to the island.
Yes, I would agree with you there, but I think historically they've made a huge mistake in the Isle of Man where they sort of encouraged a lot of retired people to move
yes.
here. And I remember thousands and thousands of retiree people coming to the Isle of Man in maybe 60 or late 50s. Yeah. But they're now all requiring a considerable amount of care.
Sure, yeah.
And they haven't had the time, or certainly not the time to pay into a system which would support what it's costing us now to keep them sort of stable and growing.
Well, it always makes me smile when government says, well, and of course we've got an ageing population. Well, yeah, because of your policies, partly.
Indeed, and it's a massive problem.
Yeah.
But getting back to the younger people, I think releasing the work permit system may not help them at all. I know of 3 or 4 of the lads that work with me said, well, this just means it's a lot easier now for people to move in from the UK or further afield and take some of these top jobs. But it's always been the case. You've had people moving out and people moving in. But unfortunately, if you lose the younger, more vibrant people of the island, it's going to be a huge disaster for the economy as a whole, I would think.
Is it just the top jobs that people are nervous about? I would have thought that it was all jobs, really, in terms of relaxing work permit rules.
Yes, it is, and this innocuous, what do they call it? Contract-free sort of labour where people come
0 hours and stuff.
0 hours,
yeah.
That sort of thing. That doesn't encourage younger people either. I mean, if somebody's worth a job, give them a full-time position and pay them properly, so they have adequate pension benefits and building up their NI contributions in a respectable manner. I mean, I think it's. I don't like 0 hours at all. I mean, I do have a social head on me, but I understand that you need to have a good active stimulus within the business sector, but I think it's swung far too much the other way now.
Right,
and I was appalled by that budget yesterday, actually. It did nothing for working people one bit.
No, certainly not the self-employed. It didn't do them any favours at all.
All
right, Neil. Well, thank you very much for your call. It's always nice to talk to you. We've got Eddie on. Hello, Eddie. Your thoughts on this?
I can't understand why the government can't understand why the young people are leaving.
Go on.
It's their policy that's gone and forced it to happen because they've gone and made everybody work longer.
Right.
So consequently, young people are stuck in the same job all the time. There's no chance for promotion.
But isn't that happening everywhere in the world? It's not just the Isle of Man, surely.
Well, what you call it, we're a small island, so it's going to affect us more, isn't it? I mean, it happened many, many years ago in the steam packet when the whole Scotch skippers all came together at the same age. So everybody else that was ready for promotion was stuck there for about 20 years.
Right.
Because they were all the same age, if you understand me.
Yeah.
And this is what's happening now. Young people who've got the qualifications, if a good job comes up in England, they're gone. They're not going to stay here and wait another 20 years.
No. I understand that. But, I mean, one of the benefits of the Isle of Man turns into a problem then, doesn't it? I don't know what the answer is to that, to be honest. But I think there's an awful lot to be said, though, for people moving off the island, if only for a few years, to get wider experience, isn't there?
Well, I had to move off the island at my age group in the early 50s when we all finished school. We nearly all had to work off the island. There was no jobs here. And
doesn't that make you a more rounded employee, though, if you've got more sort of experience outside the Isle of Man?
Well, I'm going to blow my own trumpet and say, of course, but...
Yeah, well, no, I think it's a valid point, to be honest. Yeah. There is this presumption that we want everybody to be born and die in the Isle of Man and not move off in between at any point. But I think in some cases, in a lot of cases, it's probably quite wise for people to move off and experience the wider world.
The unfortunate part of it is... Your children, I've got 2 children who've moved off the island.
Yes.
But they couldn't afford to come back to the Isle of Man because they've got very good jobs, and unfortunately we couldn't meet them.
That's the problem.
That's the problem.
Yeah, of course it is.
And also, of course, when you look into it, as somebody told you before, the prices and the stealth taxes that they keep putting onto people time and time again, and eventually people get fed up.
I think one of the biggest problems that we've got is house prices. I mean, I think the cost of living is certainly an issue, but I don't think it's, people can sort of tailor that to what they've got coming in. But the price of housing, whether you're renting or buying, is just beyond an awful lot of people. And I think that's the biggest problem we've got.
Well, you see, the unfortunate part of it is anybody who hasn't got a house before they're 50, basically they're not going to get a mortgage.
Yeah, the whole model's wrong. I've got a pal who's moved off the island at the moment, and he's living in the Far East somewhere, and he put a thing on Facebook the other day about these houses made out of shipping containers, converted shipping containers, and you can build a really, really nice house for, I can't remember if it was 10 or 20,000 quid. Yeah. Now, why doesn't government get behind that kind of thing?
Well, I mean, Liverpool has just gone and done exactly the same thing, haven't they? They've gone and built these prefab houses.
Fantastic.
With a lifespan of 50 years.
Yeah.
And they're costing £110,000. So why isn't our government doing exactly the same?
Absolutely. My thoughts entirely.
They're there for the plans are all there.
Yeah.
I mean, at the present time, Williston is going through a phase that's going to cost £39 million.
Crazy.
And basically, you would have been better to pull them down and put these prefabs in.
Somebody said that yesterday, that they're spending all this money and they're still damp and mouldy and stuff.
Well, to be quite truthful with you, I know quite a lot of people who've already gone back into their houses.
Yes.
And they didn't have damp before they moved out, and now they've got damp after they've been done so.
Crazy.
I mean, you look at it, I just hope it's not going to be another Pulrose.
Right. OK, fair dues. Eddie, thank you very much for your call. It's not just the young who leave, those caught in the middle that aren't old are leaving. It's an old island too expensive to live. OK. It seems young people don't fancy paying the pensions of our mountain of civil servants and being lumbered with stealth taxes. Let's go to the lines. We've got Ian on who wants a word. Hello, Ian.
I've been listening with interest to the comments. I've always believed the adage, it's always greener on the other side of the hill, is generally found to have been extremely disappointing and just not true.
Yeah.
So I was trying to think, are there other reasons other than all the ones that we've heard this morning? And I think there's one fairly obvious one that strikes me. The Isle of Man's boasted we've had continual growth in the economy for the last 30 years, and I've no reason to doubt that. Equally, the UK had a huge setback with the crisis in 2007-2008. And I know quite a lot of young graduates of the era of 2008 and 2011 who would normally have expected to be able to take up suitable employment in the UK or elsewhere, who couldn't find any work, had to come back to the Isle of Man. I've been living with mum and dad, not taking any job they could get or not even working.
Yes.
Since 2011, the UK economy has really rebounded. Many of these people, these young people, having not found opportunities commensurate with their education on the island, have left the island to take up the employment they would have probably taken up and liked to have taken up as far back as 2009, 2010. So unless we have a full study, unless somebody took the trouble to contact many of these young people who have left, we're just in a land of supposition and silly stories about, it's far too expensive on the island. Right. It is expensive. It's also extremely expensive in the southeast of England, which coincidentally is where many of them have gone.
Yep, you're absolutely right, yeah.
Expense. It's probably more to do with differing economic cycles in various places.
Okay.
However, the points that have been made, which I think are extremely valid, is if we fail to compete for well-educated young people as teachers, nurses, doctors, essential to the well-being of the population we have remaining on the Isle of Man, we are in trouble. We won't have families staying here if the schools aren't good enough. We won't have people staying here if you have long, long waits and no decisions on pressing operations, not necessarily for a life-threatening condition, but certainly for life-altering conditions. And that is the situation we have at the moment. And the politicians do need to get hold of that and think that sometimes you need to speculate to accumulate.
Yeah.
I think that was exactly the situation we face as far as recruiting quality employees to the vital services on the island.
All right, some very, very good points there, Ian. Thank you very much for getting into it. So a bit more study into why this has happened, maybe, rather than us all deciding that it's because whatever it might be, high house prices or whatever.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Is there a crisis in recruiting teachers to the island? Is this anything that you've spotted? The Education Minister says he's very disappointed with the recent comments of a teaching union representative. On this programme a week ago, North West Exec of the NAS UWT Damien McNulty claimed schools on the Isle of Man were edging closer to a staffing and recruitment crisis. He claimed a lack of salary increases in the profession on Ireland means that there's a big disparity with some of the areas in the UK, making it difficult to recruit and retain teachers. However, Graham Cregeen and Chief Exec of the DEC, Professor Ronald Barr, told us that they believe Mr McNulty's views of the situation on the Isle of Man are wide of the mark. What do you make of this? Which side do you agree with or think is telling the most accurate picture? Is there a crisis when it comes to recruiting teaching staff in the island, or is it just business as usual? Let's go to the lines. We've got John on who's got a point of view about this. Hello, John.
I mean, first let me say that I was really pleased to hear that one of the teaching unions has finally started to raise issues with the Isle of Man education system, because there are serious problems there, and from what I can see, while the individual teachers are doing their best to address them, they are effectively hamstrung, because with the national curriculum and all the other strictures, effectively with virtually no mechanisms left in the arsenal to deal with dysfunctional children, they're being driven to the edge. I mean, I know several teachers who've taken early retirement or just left the profession purely because of what's happening. And from what
But that's not just the Isle of Man, is it? I mean, that's right across the UK as well.
It is across the UK, but, the thing is, the Isle of Man is a small jurisdiction. I mean, one would imagine that we'd be able to deal more effectively with this. Now, I personally know this because my daughter, who's at high school, has, since she started, been basically targeted because she's quiet. And it's really, really damaging her, and not just her, but there's, she has friends, other people I know I've talked to have children, all getting the same problem. They're all being harassed by known individuals who clearly have, behavioural issues.
But how much is, and I take what you're saying and I take it very seriously, how much is that down to the teachers and the schools, though? Because, people would say, well, hang on a minute, the kids go to school to learn. They're educators. They're not there to change social issues. And this is very much a social issue, isn't it?
It is, but the point is, and yes, the teachers are not trained to deal with this kind of behaviour. As you point out, they're there to teach, and they're trying to do that. It's the Department of Education that should have mechanisms in place to actually manage this. And I mean, I've been, my family have been involved in education for a very long time. My sister's recently published a thesis which effectively is being viewed as a learned work on the whole concept of managing dysfunctional behaviour with children in education. And so, I've talked to all the teachers at my child's school, and effectively they're doing what they can, but they've consistently pointed out to me, look, we're not trained, and all that's happening from what I can see is that the dysfunctional elements in school effectively they're attempting to contain them.
Yeah.
These dysfunctional children have no respect for the system because, in my day, and I'm sure in your day as well, if we carried some of the behaviour that they're exhibiting, if we did it, I mean, we would have been beaten half to death.
Yes,
I'm not
we
saying
would.
That's the right way to handle it.
We would. And I mean, more to the point is that there have always been dysfunctional kids, haven't there, at school?
Exactly.
I went to school with troubled children as well, who were constantly in trouble, or they'd wag off and just not turn up and stuff, or they'd be behind the bike shed smoking. So, that's nothing new. Maybe the way that people deal with it has changed. Other people would say, well, hang on a minute, it's these dysfunctional kids who seem to get most of the resources because, they're taken out of schools and it costs a fortune to try and do anything with them, whereas, good kids are missing out because of that.
Well, this is exactly, it's the same thing as with criminals. You know, you see what happens to criminals. They get put into luxury prisons, they get all sorts of benefits, and their victims basically are pretty much left to their own devices. And that's exactly what's happening in our schools at the moment.
Right.
Now, a few weeks ago, I became so frustrated. I mean, well, there was an incident that one of my child's friends has head lice, or had head lice. And I phoned up the school to say, look, you know, can you not go and chat? And he said, we're not allowed to. I said, what do you mean you're not allowed to? We're not allowed to intervene.
Yeah.
You know, now talking to an educational psychologist sometime after that, she said, well, the rationale is very simple. That if this child is identified as having head lice, then the bullies will pick on them because they got head lice.
Of course,
So effectively the system is catering to the bullies, or the perception of the bullies. Now, as a result of that, several weeks ago, I phoned Department of Education, attempted to talk to, you know, senior management, and was basically told, well, yes, we'll get back in touch. And needless to say, I've heard nothing.
Right.
You know, because I want them to, you know, I've done a lot of research into how you manage these children, and the reality is, in many of them, if not all of them, are victims of some sort of dysfunctional behaviour within their family environment.
Yeah.
Now, all the research, all the initiatives worldwide, all say the same thing. Early intervention is absolutely critical. You should have, you know, teams that can go into any school, manage individuals or groups of individuals in order to find out what... I mean, it's a very simple question, as my sister said to me. She said, all you have to do is sit down with these children, get their trust and say, what's up? What's your problem? Talk to me. And she said 9 times out of 10 they will, unless they're so seriously dysfunctional that there's very little anybody can do with them.
All right. Okay. Well, I mean, the points that you raise are very valid. I don't know that they've got an awful lot to do with what we're talking about today, but certainly indicative of a much greater problem within schools. Maybe it's something that we can look at again, but I need to move on. Thank you very much for your call, John. How about asking retired teachers if they want to supplement the generous pensions, return to teaching part-time? Some of them may be bored at home and would welcome returning part-time, says Ken. Yeah, but you see, when that happens, people get up in arms about it. And then you see they're just being greedy, coming back to teaching, and they've got a pension already. I'm sure the NASWT knows their facts over and above the minister's knowledge. Well, maybe about teaching, but it's not just the minister talking, it's the department, isn't it? And it's the chief executive talking, who's an educator, so... shortage of young teachers, the reason being that just like civil service retire with wads of cash and obscenely large pension on Friday, then back through the door Monday for even more wanga. You know what they say, there's no greed like a teacher greed. What? That's from Frank. That one I'm not going to read, it's just a personal attack. Sounds like a bunch of teachers took government retirement, now offering to come back. No wonder this place has pension nightmare. Disgraceful, says James. That's on the courthouse, so we'll come back to it. And that's on the courthouse, we'll come back to it. I don't think we have any more of a problem than anywhere in the UK. Who'd want to be a teacher these days? Well, I wouldn't. My daughter's a teacher, eldest daughter's a teacher, I'm very good at it and loves it. It's a vocation for her, but you know, I think she's very brave. Pupil behaviour can be a real problem, and authorities won't back teachers against pupils, same as doctors are always waiting to be sued, have to spend so much time on paperwork, so less time for patients, says Liz. Good points. Spare the rod, spoil the child, says somebody else. Well, a lot of these, you know, old wives' tales and old ways of doing things have got a lot to be said for them, I think. Let's go to the lines. We've got Pete on. Hello, Pete.
Well, my point is, I've got a granddaughter who graduates in July. She's Manx born, you know, to be teaching.
Yeah.
So we've heard all this on the radio about all these vacancies for teachers, but she's had access online in the press and everywhere, and she can't find any details of it advertised at all.
Has she been onto the job centre?
She's been onto the job centre, she's been online, and she's had a look for all the local press as well.
I would think that the job centre would be the first place to go, because, and say, you know, we keep hearing there's a shortage of teachers. Where are the shortages? Because we've got a teacher here trained to do the job.
Well, that's it. She graduates in July. Obviously, she's Manx born. You know,
Yeah.
She wants to reside on the island. She wants to teach on the island.
Perfect. I mean, she should be allowed to work as well. I mean, I suppose there are different teachers, different grades and all the rest of it, so it might not be suitable. But if you're saying that you can't find these jobs advertised, then there's something wrong with the system, isn't there?
Something wrong somewhere. If she can't find access, obviously, she probably wouldn't get a teaching job straight away. I think you have to do a year as a trial teacher first or something like I'm not sure about all that, but
yeah,
she's a bit peeved that she can't find any information on it.
Well, I'd get in touch with the job centre and say, oi, I've just been listening to the wireless and they say that there are 30-odd jobs going for teachers. Where are they, please? Because we'd like one.
Yeah. I'll tell her to that, but I'm quite sure she's already contacted them. So
yeah, all right. Well, good luck with that, Pete. Other comments: many teachers retire because they're burnt out or are burnt out at retirement. There are some doing relief that simply should be in a classroom, not all, and there are some wonderful examples of teachers who flourish after retirement. Just needs a recognition of those that don't, a fine balance. Yes, I expect so. I think that's the problem. Let's go back to the lines. We've got Ian on. Hello, Ian.
There are a whole series of issues here about the problems in teaching, and I think to an extent whether the minister is ignorant or disingenuous, I think Professor Barr is somewhat disingenuous. If we start with what's actually happening in schools on the island at the moment, quite a lot of the teaching posts at the moment are being filled on short-term contracts or on supply, brought in through an agency across in the northwest of England. The government has to pay that agency. Within the cost to that agency are the travelling costs for those supply teachers, the accommodation for those supply teachers, and, of course, the salary of those supply teachers. So, yes, the positions are being minded, as it were, looked after,
yes,
possibly extremely well, but at what cost?
Okay, well, you raised some very, very good points there, Ian. Thank you.
The second major problem, and this I'm quite sure is what the NASUWT were alluding to, is not just the present, is the future. The UK's own figures, the Department for Education and Children equivalent in the United Kingdom, is already aware of a massive shortfall of teachers between the present time and academic year 2020-2021.
Right.
We are going to be competing with the UK for our teachers. Now, let's look at what we offer. Take the example of a female teacher with a couple of young children at home. In the UK, she can now look forward to full-time preschool provided by the UK government. On the Isle of Man here, she can look forward to having to pay something of the order of nearly £600 per child,
yes,
for preschool. That will entitle her to work and maybe take home £1,800 a month.
Yeah.
No tax relief against the necessary costs that allow her to work in the first place.
Well, I think I've got another text here that says, I think all of the problems with job vacancies is the cost of living in the Isle of Man, so that bears out your point.
Well, certainly that's part of it. I don't think housing costs by themselves are the problem. Yes, there are some cheaper places in northwest England where you can buy property, and in northern England, the schools that have the vacancies there may not be the sort of schools that people want to go
sure.
to.
Yeah.
I don't think housing costs alone. It's what happens here when you're here compared with what's on offer now in the United Kingdom by education authorities who are putting together much stronger packages, I believe, than we are on the island.
All right, some great points there, Ian. Thank you very much indeed. Very informed view on the situation. I'd not thought of any of that. Let's see, anything else about education? Agree with the previous caller, where are teachers going to go to the UK? Stuart, due to declining population, do we need more teachers, says Jack? Yes, because the figure of 30-odd was based on the current requirements, so yes, we do. Long term, I don't know. Stu, your caller suggested female teachers should get free childcare. Why should they? I and everybody else had or do have to pay for our own childcare. Why should we pay for theirs too, says Cindy. That's a valid point, yeah.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
That's it for the latest look back at Talking Heads. Our thanks as ever to everyone who contributed to the programme. If you'd like to get involved in the discussion, you can call, text or email between midday and 2 p.m. on weekdays, or get your thoughts to us via Facebook or Twitter using the hashtag MRTalkingHeads. You can listen back to each day's programme in full using the on-demand section of manxradio.com. And if there's anything you think we should be discussing on the programme, let us know by emailing talk@manxradio.com. But that's it for now, so until next time, goodbye.
Don't sit in the slow lane. Join the fast lane right now with Shaw's all-new Superfast Plus broadband. Enjoy more bandwidth, amazing speeds and the best value on the island from just £23.95 per month. So don't be left behind. Get a piece of the high-speed action with Superfast Plus broadband from Shaw. For details, visit our stores in Douglas, Ramsey and Port Erin or click shaw.com.
Love being Shaw.
Terms and conditions apply.